Did you know that for the low price of just £960, you too can now field 72 Tyranid warriors and bring all the dreams of the best army ever invented to the battlefield? Because the brand new Tyranid Detachment, which has been revealed today, is all about warriors. And whilst, like the Death Guard and the Dark Angels, I don't think it is going to be the be-all and end-all of competitive choices going forward, it is still very fun, and it is, if nothing else, really good at letting you get some solid use out of your warriors, as well as a pretty decent all-round good detachment to try out and maybe even bring to some slightly less competitive top-level tournaments and still do rather well at. The Warrior Bioform Onslaught brings some genuinely great boosts to the Humble Warrior, which has always been a favourite unit of mine. I love them, I've loved them since 2nd edition, so I am really glad to see them finally get at least a little bit of a boost towards being more playable now. The Leader Beasts detachment rule not only gives both sorts of Tyranid warriors and the Tyranid Prime a 5-up invuln, which massively helps with the warrior's native 4-up armor save, and it really will help to keep them trucking with their toughness 5 and 3 wounds much longer now. But they also gain the Tyranid warriors and the battle line keywords, which is a huge boost to them, being able to interact with more of the latest season rules, as well as having battle line, meaning that you can bring even more of them in your army. So it's a really great way to just overall improve their usefulness. But that isn't all they get, because on top of that, they also become OC3 if they are not battle shocked. So essentially, something like your melee Tyranid warriors now, for 25 points each, are sporting toughness 5, 3 wounds, a 4-up armor save, a 5-up invuln, and an OC3 profile that in melee will get 6 attacks that hit on 3s at strength 6 thanks to the new synapse rules, -2 AP, 1 damage, and twin linked. Now sure, just being 1 damage is a bit of a downer, but 6 melee warriors with no other buffs at all on them can still chuck out over 10 wounds into a Terminator profile, so killing over 3 Terminators, which for just 150 points is a solid little chunk. And then with any other buffs or the Tyranid Prime leading them, that just gets even more powerful. And you've got to remember, that is also 6 3-wound models, so that is 18 wounds that you're going to be having on the board. So it is a nice, solid, not super durable, but now much more durable thanks to the 5-up invuln, so they can actually stick around a lot longer than they ever could do before. So yes, they are definitely a heck of a lot better than previously, and whilst they are maybe still not the best value for points going, as I said earlier, it does go a long way to make them more viable. They are now more durable, more spammable, and just even better at taking and holding objectives. And I mean, in general, it's a fairly straightforward detachment. You see Tyranid warriors, you buff Tyranid warriors, and that follows through for the detachment rule, but also for most of the enhancements, which are very straightforward. They are incredibly simple, to the point, and generally just give an easy flat buff to the bearer and its unit. They can be a little pricey in some cases, which is a downside. I wouldn't say no to maybe a 5-point drop on the last 3 of them, but the first one we have is the 10-point Synaptic Tyrant, which is a quirky little enhancement. I don't think we've seen anything like it before in 10th edition, but it essentially allows you to join a Neuro Tyrant with this enhancement to a unit of Tyranid warriors. So normally they can only join Zoanthropes, Tyrant Guard, and Neurogaunts, and they are very solid with Zoanthropes, but now having the option to join warriors does bring quite a lot of benefits. Firstly, I mean, Neurotyrants are pretty great generally. They are a very useful 105-point unit to bring some bonuses to Shadow in the Warp, as well as helping to spread your synapse a bit more around the board. But their main rule, Node Lash, gives the unit they've joined +1 to hit, and if their target is battle shocked, also +1 to wound. Now, this is obviously great on things like Zoanthropes, but it is both ranged and melee, so they are actually equally good in a shooty warrior unit or a melee warrior unit, and getting your ranged attacks down to hitting on 3s instead of a 4, or your melee warriors to now hitting on 2s, does make them really quite scary with a Neuro Tyrant with them. And I think if you are bringing a Neuro Tyrant, which let's be honest, in the current Tyranid meta, you probably are, having a nice big unit of 6 warriors with a Neuro Tyrant joining them is quite a good shout, especially if you don't have anything else that you were planning on joining them instead. It does add quite a solid boost to the warrior's output. It helps to keep the Neuro Tyrant safe with those 9 or 18 toughness 5 wounds, and you can also add a bit more extra of your own shooting with the Neuro Tyrant's Psychic Scream as your warriors are moving up the board and into position. So it's a solid enhancement. It is maybe not super flashy, but I think it's definitely a great one to bring if you are taking this detachment and you want a Neuro Tyrant and you have a blob of warriors that you don't have anything else to join to them. The next two enhancements are similar in many ways. They're both 20 points, they both go on a winged Tyranid Prime, and they both buff the unit they are with. Ocular Adaptation is up first, and this one improves your output. It means that whenever the bearer's unit makes an attack, you get +1 to hit. So if you don't have the aforementioned Neuro Tyrant joining them, a Tyranid Prime with this can still get you that +1 to hit. And of course the Prime also brings sustained hits 1, so your melee warriors can now potentially be hitting on 2s with exploding 6s, so they can be really good in combat now. The other option is Sensory Assimilation. This again is 20 points, but instead of boosting your output, it actually boosts your durability. This one gives the bearer's unit -1 to be hit by enemy attacks, so on top of your new and improved 5-up Invan, you can effectively get even more protection for your melee or your ranged warriors. And it's actually a fairly impactful combo with the new Invan. It will make a huge difference against some of those low volume, high damage shots that are typically the bane of warriors, because not only will they now have a much harder time punching through your armor with any -2 or -3 AP, but also thanks to the generally low volume of shots that those kind of guns have, the -1 to hit can really impact just how many shots they get through into you. And as a very quick example, something like a 3-man Inceptor squad with the overcharged Plasma Exterminators, so strength 8, -3 AP and 3 damage, goes from doing around 3.5 unsaved wounds, so killing an entire 3-man squad thanks to the flat 3 damage, to in this detachment with this enhancement, doing about 1.7. So potentially, instead of killing 3 warriors outright, maybe only just killing one of them. So it can make a big impact on your survivability, and I think if you have a big unit of 6 melee warriors, especially with a prime in, this is going to be super valuable to help keep them alive as they are marching up the battlefield. The final enhancement is also very good, but it's not just for warriors or the Tyranid Prime. This can go on any Tyranid model, and for 30 points it grants the bearer and his unit advance and charge. Now, obviously this is good for melee warriors and the like, but equally, a Broodlord with some Gene Stealers will absolutely love this. Even just a regular Hive Tyrant with this could make good use of it, just to get into combat that much quicker. So it's a great all-round enhancement. It is going to be very useful for a lot of your units. At 30 points, it is a bit pricey. I do think it could be 25 and still be good, but not too powerful. But at the end of the day, if you do want advance and charge on a unit, you can definitely do that in this detachment. So it is all round 4 very useful, very good enhancements to play around with. And I think all of them seem fairly fun, as well as an interesting way to change the makeup of your squads or add some extra offensive or defensive power, or just supercharge that one particular unit to get into the enemy as quickly as possible. The 6 stratagems you get are also quite focused around warriors, although not exclusively so, and they are all also 1 CP, which is really great because I think you will be, if nothing else, very CP starved in this detachment. They are all quite good, and you will be wanting to use pretty much all of these quite a lot. Synaptic Amplification is in the shooting or fight phase. It lets you pick a unit that hasn't shot or fought, and if the unit is a Tyranid warrior unit, you can also pick an Endless Multitude unit within 6 inches of it, and then until the end of the phase, the models in both of those units get to reroll wound rolls of 1, and the Tyranid Warriors unit can also reroll hit rolls of 1 on top of that. So there is a little bit of a hoop to jump through, but it does mean that you can potentially buff 2 units, the Endless Multitude one getting reroll wound rolls of 1, and your warrior unit getting reroll hits and wound rolls of 1. So that is actually fairly tasty for a 1 command point stratagem, and it really does incentivize you keeping your warriors spread out around the board and near some of your other units to get those double buffs going. Synaptic Micronodes is a movement phase stratagem. This one lets you pick a warrior unit and an objective marker that your unit is in range of and that you control, and it very simply grants you sticky objectives on it. Now, sticky objectives is a fantastic rule. It will massively help you score those victory points and just win on the objective game. So it's a great tool to have in your back pocket to let you take an objective, sticky it, and then just move on to make use of your warriors elsewhere on the board. So again, a really simple, straightforward, but very, very powerful stratagem to have. Next up, we have Spontaneous Hypercorrosion. That is firstly a little bit of a mouthful. You again pick any Tyranid unit, and then until the end of the phase, you add 2 to the strength of their ranged weapons. So strength 14 Zonethropes, strength 11 Exocrine, even something like strength 7 Barb Gaunts can now be much more of a threat into those toughness 5 or toughness 6 elite infantry like Terminators or Custodes. So this is a really, really good boost to your ranged output. But then on top of that, if the unit you chose was a warrior unit, they can also add 1 to the strength of their melee weapons, so boosting things like your melee warriors up to strength 7 thanks to Synapse, and things like your Tyranid Prime up to strength 8, so he will now be wounding Marines on 2s. So once again, just a really nice bonus to have there that is going to make your output in both ranged and melee much more impactful into a lot of key enemy breakpoints. Fourth strat in the detachment is Parasitic Payload. This is in your shooting phase. When a warrior unit with ranged weapons fires, they gain ignores cover on their weapons, which can actually go quite a long way to boost the output of their -1 and -2 AP guns like Death Spitters and Venom Cannons. But they also make it so that the enemy unit they targeted, if they get any hits on them, can't benefit from cover for the rest of the phase. So it then lets all your other subsequent shooting also effectively count as a bonus AP, so making even things like your Exocrines and your Zonethrope shots much less hindered by all the cover that is around the board in 10th edition. The one downside of this is that ranged warriors still aren't particularly great, it has to be said, but if you've got a lot of shooting in your list, maybe just taking 1 unit to proc this effect could end up being quite a big force multiplier. So I do think that it is still quite an effective stratagem if you have any ranged units in your army. Restorative Impulse is up next. This is again a nice simple one. It's 1 command point, and in your command phase you can bring a warrior back from the dead. So essentially for the cost of 1 CP, you get a toughness 5 3 wound model back. It's not awful, and if you need to swing an objective or just make sure your squad is going to survive that last round of enemy attacks, it will come in really quite clutch in those situations. It's nothing super outrageous or flashy, and there will be times when you think, I don't really need that 1 extra warrior, so I'm going to save the CP. But a revived Tyranid warrior is a revived Tyranid warrior, so when you do need it just to steal that objective or flip that objective or just survive that last battle round, could be a nice thing to have up your sleeve. Finally, we have the Synaptic Shield. This is in your opponent's shooting phase after they have selected a target, and if they have targeted one of your warrior units, you can pick an Endless Multitude unit within 6 inches of your warriors, and then until the end of that phase, any attacks that go into either of your units, if the strength of the attack is higher than the toughness, it's at -1 to wound. So not only protecting your warriors better against enemy shooting, but also making things like your Hormagaunts and your Termagants much more durable against any subsequent shooting. Now I think if I'm reading it right, the one downside to this is that it's potentially quite easy to get around, because as far as I can tell, the enemy could just target your Endless Multitude unit first with all the shooting that's going into them, and they wouldn't get this buff before they then shoot into your Tyranid warriors. So you can potentially get round this strat quite easily, I think, but still, it's a solid durability strat, and it definitely will help to keep your warriors and some gaunts alive when you do need it. The warriors, especially in conjunction with their new 5-up invuln, are going to really like having this on them. So I think all in all, it is a very, very fun, very fluffy, very warrior focused detachment, which I personally love. As I said at the beginning, I've always adored warriors, and now that I feel you can use a full list of them and not feel like you're completely penalizing yourself. I mean, it's not going to be better than the invasion fleet or the assimilation swarm, I don't think, but for me anyway, from what we've seen from these detachments so far, what they do is they offer a viable alternative for maybe not top level play, but a viable alternative for slightly less competitive, more fun settings, but are still powerful enough that you could bring them to maybe a small local tournament and still do quite well with them. And I'll be honest with this one specifically, I love it. I think it may well be my favorite of the 3 we've seen so far. I can't wait to see just how many warriors people end up bringing in this detachment to take full advantage of all the new buffs and rules they get. And that's going to be it for this video, but what do you think of the warrior bioform Onslaught? Will you be giving it a try? And do you think it does enough to make warriors a viable option now? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.